Hello friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a review for the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb. Now, as some of you may know and some of you may not, the Farseer Trilogy is part of Robin Hobb's greater universe called The Realm of the Elderlings, and I believe that there are 16 books in that series. There are 4 trilogies and a quartet. Could be wrong about that because that's a lot of books, but as I work through it more, I'm sure that I will figure it out because I'll want to know what books that I'm going to be reading. However, the Farseer Trilogy is the trilogy from this universe that a lot of people recommend should be read first because this is sort of a great entry point to this world and the story that it is crafting, like the larger story that eventually ends up expanding. So, the Farseer Trilogy obviously consists of 3 books. That would be Assassin's Apprentice as the first book, then Royal Assassin, and then finally followed by Assassin's Quest. So this trilogy follows primarily our main character of Fitz, whose full name is Fitz Chivalry Farseer, and this is our main character, really, because this is a trilogy that is written from first-person perspective, point of view. So Fitz is the person whose head we are in. There are, of course, other main characters, like other important characters that we follow, but Fitz is our voice throughout this series, and he is who we are seeing the world from. So I'm just going to give a brief synopsis, and then I'll get more into the review stuff, where I'll talk about things that I think are pros from this series and things that I think are cons. I'm going to do my best to keep this spoiler free, but if I need to get into spoilers, then I will very clearly mark on the video where I do that so that you don't have to be worried about being spoiled for anything here. So, as the titles of these books make pretty clear, the main storyline that we're dealing with for Fitz is his development and relationship with his role as an assassin. So the main thing that we are developing is we are watching Fitz as he grows and develops into a person. The first book in this series is very much a coming of age story because we start with Fitz when he is about 6 years old, and then we finish with him when he is about 16. So Fitz is a royal bastard, which means that he was fathered by one of the princes out of wedlock, and he has been brought to live in the presence of the royal family, kind of in the castle, and so he has a very interesting role there because he is not necessarily accepted, and he's also not necessarily rejected. He has a very in-between role of personhood where he doesn't quite fit somewhere, but he doesn't quite fit somewhere else either. And it is a really interesting dynamic to watch him grow up that way. And his position as a royal bastard really is the root of his entire story, because that identity for him is what drives the way that people treat him and the way that the plot develops around him. Now that I've given a very vague synopsis, let me get into some of the things that I think are good about this series. The first pro that I want to talk about is Robin Hobb's prose. So when I very first picked up Assassin's Apprentice, I personally was a little bit thrown off by the first person point of view, and it happens to me every time. When I pick up a book that has first person, it takes me a little bit to adjust. So at first, I didn't quite connect with what people were talking about with Robin Hobb's prose. I didn't really allow myself to feel it and to notice it at first because I was trying to get my bearings. But once I did, I realized what it was about Robin Hobb's prose that makes it so great, because she has such skill with description and with turns of phrase that she can really illustrate for you what's going on, and her choice of words and her descriptions are fantastic, and she really knows how to create a feeling for you. But she does it in an almost not straightforward way, because her prose is really nice to read, but it's also not necessarily flowery or lyrical. It can be lyrical and beautiful at times, times if she's trying to describe something to you that's more abstract, but on like a day-to-day basis in the book, she really is just bringing you along in a way that is beautiful in its simplicity, and it's her word choice that really makes it. In that sense, I find my enjoyment of her prose quite similar to my enjoyment of Daniel Abraham's prose, the author of the Long Price Quartet. Both of them get me in that way, where their descriptions of things aren't trying to do too much, but they're just doing the perfect thing for me to allow me to get the feeling of what they want. The second thing that I really like about Robin Hobb is her characters and her dialogue, and I'm wrapping this into one thing even though they can be considered separate or together, but the reason that I'm considering them together is because I think that she develops fantastic characters throughout this series, and one of the ways that she does that is the ways in which they interact with each other. She constructs some great conversations between characters. It is always engaging. I genuinely think that she writes conversations that, in the world that she is writing, feel very natural and realistic ways for characters to speak. And sometimes I think that readers don't notice or appreciate dialogue until you read it done poorly. Because when you read it done poorly, it's really easy to think, well, nobody would say that, and that's when you notice it. But when it's done well, it's just so easy to read that your brain almost skips over it, but that's because it's done so well. And I think that that is one of Robin Hobb's strengths, is her interactions between characters. I love reading, like, for example, interactions between Fitz and Burrich, which is the stable master of the keep, or Fitz and Prince Verity, who is the king's son, or Fitz and Chade, who is sort of like a secret mysterious figure who is also an assassin, or Fitz and the Fool, who is like the fool at court in the castle. I mean, obviously all of these involve Fitz, because Fitz is who we see the world from, but all of these characters, they feel so distinct and real and different from one another, and they all have their own way of speaking, and they all have their own like characteristics and personality, and all of the conversation, like all of the perspectives that they bring to Fitz are different. And it's just great when you can tell who your characters are while still allowing some mystery, because it's not like Fitz knows everything about them, but there is so much rich, like, depth to their characters and their conversations and the way that they interact with the world. Like, these characters stand for things. They have opinions. They feel like real people. They have flaws. So I love that about Robin Hobb's characters, and there's one character in particular who I will not name because I said that I wasn't going to go into spoilers, but I will just tell you that Robin Hobb is also very adept at making you hate someone if she wants you to. And so that leads me into my next pro, which is emotions. Robin Hobb goes through the full range of emotions. You have the entirety from like happiness to triumph to sadness to grief to rage to like wanting to throw the book across the room because you're so frustrated. And I think that she just brings that out so well, and that is also connected to the characters, because when you're engaged with the characters and you feel that deeply for them, then when she goes for an emotional moment, it truly is impactful. And I personally felt like the entire range of emotions while I was reading this book, which I absolutely loved about them. So another thing that I really liked about these books were the magic systems that Robin Hobb implemented here, because I won't go into too much detail, again, no spoilers, but you basically have two main magic systems that are explored here that are the skill, which is a skill. It's basically an attribute that is not necessarily rare, but is not super common and is often commonly found in the royal line. And the skill is sort of like a mental ability to connect with things and to influence them. And then there's also the wit, which is very similar to the skill in some ways, but also very different, because the wit kind of allows you to connect with life around you, like it allows you to sense life, and it allows you more to connect with animals or things that like couldn't communicate with you otherwise. So I won't say anything more than that because you find out a lot more about these magics as the series goes on. But I thought they were both very, very cool and very interesting, and I loved the way that Robin Hobb slowly built up your knowledge of both of them and also wove them into the plot in ways that was interesting and relevant, and she really, I think, allowed them to flourish and then allowed them also to be relevant in a way that paid off well in the end. And the reason that this is so interesting to me is because a lot of this series kind of feels like low magic fantasy. However, the magics are still allowed to pay off in a very interesting way. So I thought that she did that very well. And the final thing that I liked about this trilogy was Robin Hobb's plotting, which I really am not going to say too much about because like I don't even really want to vaguely spoil anything by telling you like spoilers out of context or anything. But the reason why I like Robin Hobb's plotting is because I think that she does a really good job at drawing all the threads that she has set up together and giving each thing that needs payoff, like wrapping it up in a satisfying way. Like I think she did a really good job of keeping track of a lot of her plots. So she's not like leaving you wondering, she's not leaving something really unresolved. At the end, you get the answers that you've been waiting for throughout the series, and I think that it paid off in a satisfying way. So I liked that. Now, I really did love this series, so I don't have too many cons to talk about, but I do have a few things that just grated at me a little bit throughout the reading of this series. But again, I gave Assassin's Apprentice 4 stars, Royal Assassin 5 stars, and Assassin's Quest 4.5 stars. And this is definitely a favorite series for me now. So like, I guess take these with a grain of salt. Not that I don't mean it, because I do, but it's not like these things dragged down my overall enjoyment of the series. I still loved it. So the first one is gonna be pacing. We begin the first book with, like I mentioned earlier, sort of a coming-of-age story, and I don't mind a slow-paced story, but I did think it was like night and day for most of the first book versus the end of the first book. Things escalate very quickly, and I just thought that if maybe a little bit of that action could have been sprinkled in a little bit earlier, if we could have had more exciting things happen a little bit earlier, I don't know. I'm not exactly mad about the way that she did it, but I did think there was a stark difference in the pacing. It kind of switches halfway through, where it starts very slow and then it just ramps up. So there is a slow part to begin this series. I pretty much had no problems with the pacing in Royal Assassin because I adored Royal Assassin. But once you get to Assassin's Quest, I honestly thought that Assassin's Quest could have been split into 2 books. Either that, or it was simply too long, if it was only meant to be 3 books, which it was. But basically, the start of Assassin's Quest is interesting, and then there's a bit where things slow down. And then the end of Assassin's Quest is faster again. So I did think it was a little bit inconsistent throughout. Like, Royal Assassin I was pretty much good with, but the first and third books have some pacing inconsistencies in them that I know might bother some people more than they bothered me, because they bothered me a little bit, but they didn't destroy my enjoyment of it. But I just know that it's good to know that that stuff is in there, and that is a little bit of a con for the series. The second thing is the inconsistency in Robin Hobb writing female characters. Like, Robin Hobb is a fantastic author, and she's also a woman, and she writes some really great female characters in this series, but it's almost like she went on a run for part of this series where she just wrote female characters that were only there for one purpose, that was not an appealing purpose, and just acted in a way that I didn't find realistic and was very kind of petty and one-dimensional. and then that kind of goes away again. I don't really understand what happened there, Robin. Like, there is literally this one section where this happens, and it's strange. And so that was a problem for me. But then again, like, the book saved itself. Like, later on, my enjoyment went back up. It was just odd. And then my final con for this series is honestly like a pretty small one, in the sense that it bothered me sometimes and it didn't bother me other times. So this is one where your mileage may vary, but this one is going to be Fitz being an idiot. And there are times in this series where, like, the reader kind of puts something together that Fitz doesn't, and it's like, why doesn't Fitz see this? Like, Fitz is meant to be very smart. So I did get annoyed a couple times where Fitz took actions based on not knowing all the information, when I thought that he really should have known all the information. Like, there were enough clues that he should have been able to put it together. And when he was making bad decisions based on incorrect information, I know that it happened for plot reasons, but it was frustrating. There are more things that I could say. There are more good things that I could say about this series, but I'm really trying to keep this video concise and focus on the most important things that I have to say about this series. I really did love it. So I think that, I mean, I know that this is a very popular classic fantasy series and fantasy author, so I know that a lot of people probably already are aware of its existence. However, if you aren't, and if you are looking for a shorter fantasy series, the books are not that short, but it is a trilogy. So it's 3 books, which is less overwhelming than some other fantasy series options. I would recommend this to you if you like books that are focused and grounded on good character work. I would recommend this to you. I really think that what Robin Hobb did here was fantastic, and I am super, super excited to get into Live Ship Traders and to get further into the realm of the Elderlings, and to just continue with Robin Hobb, because she really impressed me here. So I think that is it for this one. I don't want to keep rambling, but please drop me a comment and let me know what you think of the Farseer Trilogy and what you think of what I said about it. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content from me. I post videos every Monday and Thursday, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!